Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'd been living in this rough neighborhood for about 2 years after my divorce. The rent was cheap, which was all I could afford on my construction worker's salary after splitting everything with my ex-wife. The area wasn't great, but I minded my own business and tried to stay out of trouble. The local grocery store always had a police cruiser parked outside because of all the shoplifting and disturbances. That Tuesday evening, I was just picking up my usual weekly supplies. Nothing fancy, some bread, milk, lunch meat for work sandwiches, and a few frozen dinners. I was walking down the beverage aisle when I noticed this little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, desperately trying to climb up the shelving unit. She was reaching for a case of energy drinks on a high shelf, clearly struggling and looking pretty upset about it. The kid was tiny and the shelf was way too high for her. I could see she was getting frustrated and might hurt herself trying to climb higher, so I walked over and reached up to grab the case she was pointing at. I told her here it was and handed it to her. Her face lit up with relief and she thanked me before taking the case and immediately starting to run toward the front of the store. But she was moving too fast and the case was heavy for her size. About halfway down the aisle, she tripped over her own feet. The case went flying, cans scattered everywhere, and a couple of them popped open, spraying energy drink all over the floor and on her clothes. The poor thing started crying immediately, not just because she was wet, but she seemed genuinely panicked about something. I thought she was just embarrassed about making a mess, so I started picking up the cans and tried to calm her down. I told her it was okay and that accidents happen and that we'd get it cleaned up, but she kept crying and looking toward the front of the store like she was terrified of something. That's when I heard footsteps stomping down the aisle. This 17-year-old girl came storming toward us, demanding to know what the little girl was doing and why she was crying. She yelled that she had told her to get a case of energy drinks and meet her at the car. The little girl shrank back when she saw her coming. I explained that the little girl had just tripped and was freaked out about making a mess. The older girl spun around and looked at me, demanding to know who I was. I started to explain that I was just helping her get the case down before she could hurt herself trying to climb the shelf. But then the older girl accused me of knocking her sister down and said I couldn't do that to people. I tried to tell her I didn't do anything and was just helping, but she got even more aggressive. She started yelling that I had screwed up and demanding to see my manager. When I tried to explain that I didn't understand what she was talking about, she told me to shut up and accused me of hurting her sister. She threatened to sue the store. This girl was completely losing it, getting louder and more aggressive by the second. I tried to explain that I didn't even work there, but she wouldn't listen. She was screaming so loud that other customers were starting to stare. The little girl was still crying and seemed more scared of her older sister than anything else. That's when the store manager showed up. He took one look at the scene, cans everywhere, energy drink pooled on the floor, a crying child, and this teenager screaming at me, and asked what was going on. The older girl immediately started ranting that the store's idiot employee had stopped her little sister from grabbing the energy drinks and hurt her. She threatened to sue the store. The manager looked confused and asked me what had happened. I told him I had no clue what she was talking about, and explained that I just handed the little girl the case because she couldn't reach it, and then she ran off and tripped. The manager walked over to the little girl, who was still sniffling and looked absolutely terrified. He gently asked if she was okay and what had happened. The little girl wiped her tears and looked nervously at her older sister before admitting that she didn't want to do something and that her older sister had made her. When the manager asked what she had been made to do, she said her sister made her take the energy drinks and she was supposed to grab them and take them to the car. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't just an accident. The older girl had sent her little sister to steal the energy drinks. The older girl insisted that it didn't matter and kept yelling that the store employee had hurt her sister and that she was going to sue for assault. The manager's expression changed completely. He knelt down and gently took the little girl's hand, telling her it was okay and that they'd get her cleaned up. He motioned to his assistant manager who had come over to see what all the commotion was about. He told her to take the little girl to the back room and help her get cleaned up. The older girl said that wouldn't save anyone and that they were still going to sue no matter what. She started following the assistant manager and her sister toward the back of the store, still yelling threats. The manager waited until they were out of earshot, then asked me to follow him to the front. He told me he needed to call the police because the older girl was trying to make her little sister steal, and now she was trying to blame me for stopping it. We walked to the customer service desk where he could see the police cruiser in the parking lot. He flagged down the officer who came inside to hear what happened. The officer called for backup, and within 10 minutes, there were 2 police cars outside. When the officers went to the back room to talk to both girls, the older girl completely lost it. She screamed about how employees couldn't touch people and that I had hurt her sister. She demanded that they arrest me and kept yelling at her little sister to tell the police that I had hurt her. But the little girl didn't say anything. She just held on to the assistant manager's hand and watched the officers put handcuffs on her older sister. The manager showed the police the security footage, which clearly showed me helping the little girl get the case down, her running away and tripping on her own, and me trying to help clean up the mess. It was obvious I had nothing to do with any kind of assault. The officers took my statement and let me go, but they kept both girls to sort out what was really happening. I found out later from the manager that the whole situation was much worse than anyone realized. Their mother was never home and basically abandoned them. The older girl had been forcing her little sister to steal things for her regularly. When Child Protective Services got involved, the little girl finally felt safe enough to tell them everything. She'd been terrified to speak up before because her older sister had been abusing her and threatening her if she ever told anyone. The older girl ended up getting charged with child abuse and theft. She was sentenced to juvenile detention and then prison when she turned 18. The little girl was placed with a foster family who actually cared about her. I still shop at that same store, and sometimes the manager asks how I'm doing. He told me the little girl is doing much better now. She's in school, has friends, and doesn't have to worry about being forced to steal anymore. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't helped her that day. Would she have kept getting hurt? Would anyone have figured out what was going on? I'm just glad that one moment of helping someone reach a high shelf ended up getting her out of a terrible situation. I spent 25 years as a police officer in this city, working everything from traffic stops to domestic disputes. After a quarter century of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer, I finally hung up my badge last year at 55. My wife had been begging me to retire for years, especially after I took a bullet in the shoulder during a robbery gone wrong 3 years back. The department offered me a nice pension package, and frankly I was ready to trade my patrol car for peaceful morning walks and afternoon naps. But here's the thing about being a cop for that long. You never really stop being one. The instincts stay with you. When you see trouble brewing, something inside you just can't walk away. My wife always jokes that I have a hero complex, and maybe she's right. But when you've spent your whole career protecting people, it becomes second nature. So there I was, enjoying what should have been a quiet Saturday afternoon in Riverside Park. The weather was perfect. Families were having picnics. Kids were playing on the swings. I was just minding my own business, taking my usual route past the duck pond, when I heard shouting coming from near the fountain area. Now, most people would probably keep walking, but like I said, old habits die hard. I made my way over to see what was happening, and that's when I first laid eyes on her, Karen. She was maybe 45, dressed in expensive workout clothes, clutching a designer purse like it was a weapon. Her face was turning red, and she was absolutely losing it on this young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. The younger woman looked like she was about to cry. She was sitting on a park bench with a small child, maybe 3 years old, who was clearly getting upset by all the yelling. The kid was tugging on his mom's sleeve, asking why the scary lady was so mad. I walked up and asked them what was going on. Karen immediately whipped around to face me, and I could see the fury in her eyes. She snapped at me to mind my own business and called me an old man, saying this didn't concern me. I've been called worse things by worse people, so her attitude didn't faze me. I turned to the young mother instead and asked if she was okay. The young woman explained that she thought so, but that Karen was saying she stole her spot on the bench. She told me she'd been sitting there for 20 minutes with her son feeding the ducks. Karen shouted that it was her bench and that she sat there every Saturday at 2 o'clock. She claimed it had been her spot for years. Now, I've heard some ridiculous claims in my time, but this one took the cake. A public park bench belonging to one person? I tried to keep my voice calm and reasonable when I told her this was a public park and nobody owned the benches here. I pointed out there were plenty of other places to sit. Karen became even more furious, asking how I dared take the young woman's side and telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. The little boy started crying, which made his mother even more distressed. She was trying to comfort him while this lunatic continued her rant. That's when my cop instincts really kicked in. I told them there was no need to upset the child and suggested we all take a deep breath and figure this out like adults. Karen completely lost it, screaming about adults and calling us both idiots who didn't understand how things worked around here. She was getting more agitated by the second, her voice getting louder and more shrill. Other park visitors were starting to stare, some pulling out their phones to record. I could tell the situation was about to escalate, and I needed to de-escalate it fast. I told Karen I thought she needed to calm down because she was scaring the little boy. She screamed back that she didn't care about some brat and that the woman had stolen her bench. She demanded the mother leave immediately. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She started walking toward the young mother with her fists clenched, clearly intending to physically remove her from the bench. The mom instinctively pulled her son closer, fear written all over her face. I stepped between them, holding up my hands and telling Karen that was enough. I ordered her to step back right now. She called me a pathetic old fool and told me to get out of her way. And then she lost it completely. She came at me with both hands, trying to shove me out of the way so she could get to the mother and child. Now, I may be retired, but I'm far from helpless. 25 years of police training doesn't just disappear because you turn in your badge. When she lunged forward, I used a simple defensive move. I sidestepped to the right and let her own momentum carry her past me. She stumbled forward, completely off balance, and went down hard on the concrete path. Her designer purse went flying, spilling its contents everywhere. The small crowd that had gathered gasped. Karen was on her hands and knees, looking shocked that her attack had backfired so spectacularly. Her workout clothes were dirty, her hair was a mess, and her ego was clearly bruised worse than her knees. Karen screamed that I had attacked her and that she was calling the police. She threatened to have me arrested for assault. I chuckled at that and told her I was the police, or at least used to be. I explained I had 25 years on the force, and what just happened was self-defense against her attempted assault. Her face went pale. The young mother was already on her phone, and I could hear her talking to a 911 dispatcher. She was telling them there had been an incident at Riverside Park where a woman tried to attack a man and fell down, and that they needed officers there. Karen scrambled to her feet trying to collect her scattered belongings while insisting this was ridiculous and that she was the victim here. She kept ranting about how that bench was hers. One of the bystanders, an elderly gentleman who'd been watching the whole thing, stepped forward and told Karen he'd been coming to this park for 15 years and had never seen her before in his life. He said she couldn't just claim a public bench. Another witness, a jogger who'd stopped to watch, said he got the whole thing on video and that she definitely attacked me first. Within 5 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up. I recognized one of the officers, Rodriguez, who'd been my partner for 3 years before I retired. His face lit up when he saw me, and he asked what I was doing there, joking that he hoped I wasn't causing trouble in my retirement. I told him I was just enjoying a peaceful walk that got a little less peaceful. I explained the situation while Karen continued to rant about her stolen bench and how she was the real victim. The officers took statements from multiple witnesses, all of whom corroborated my version of events. The jogger even showed them his video. Officer Rodriguez told Karen she was being arrested for attempted assault and read her rights. When they cuffed her, Karen went into full meltdown mode, screaming that this was insane and that she knew people. She threatened that she'd have all our jobs and claimed her husband was a lawyer. She kept yelling that they couldn't do this to her. The young mother thanked me so much, saying she didn't know what would have happened if I hadn't been there. I told her I was just glad everyone was okay and asked if her little guy was handling all this all right. The boy had stopped crying and was now fascinated by the police cars. Kids that age bounce back quick. The little boy asked if I was a policeman too. I told him I used to be, but now I just took walks and fed ducks. When they loaded Karen into the patrol car, she was still screaming about lawsuits and how unfair everything was. Officer Rodriguez came over to shake my hand and said, "Some things never change." He mentioned I always did have a knack for being in the right place at the right time. I told him it was the wrong place and wrong time from where I was sitting, and that I just wanted a quiet walk. Rodriguez said Karen was looking at assault charges, disturbing the peace, and probably a psychological evaluation. He mentioned her husband might be a lawyer, but that wasn't going to help her here. After the police left, I sat with the young mother and her son for a while. She told me she was a single mom working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and the park was one of the few free places she could take her kid to have fun. The thought of some entitled woman trying to claim ownership of a public space and then attacking people over it made my blood boil. We watched her son play on the swings for another hour. He was a good kid, polite and well-behaved, despite everything he'd just witnessed. His mom was doing a great job raising him under difficult circumstances. When I was getting ready to leave, she thanked me again, saying she kept thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't been there. I told her not to dwell on it, and that people like Karen were all bark and no bite. I said she learned today that actions have results. 3 weeks later, I ran into Officer Rodriguez at the grocery store. He told me Karen had pled guilty to assault charges and received community service, anger management classes, and a restraining order keeping her away from the park for 6 months. Apparently, her lawyer husband was pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. Now the young mother and her son still go to the same bench every Saturday. I've started timing my walks to meet them there. The kid loves hearing stories about police work, and his mom always brings extra crackers for the ducks. A few years back, I was working as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown when my older brother called me with an opportunity. He'd gotten a promotion that required him to relocate halfway across the state, and he needed to sell his condo fast. Since we'd always had a good relationship and he knew I was tired of throwing money away on rent, he offered me a deal that was too good to pass up. The condo was in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but well-maintained from what I could see. My brother explained that the homeowners association wouldn't let him rent it out, which is why he had to sell. I should have taken that as the first red flag, but I was excited about finally owning my own place. The paperwork went smoothly, and within a month, I was moving into my new home. That's when I started learning about homeowners associations the hard way. It began with small things. The monthly fees seemed high for what we were getting, and the board was incredibly strict about minor violations like leaving trash cans out too long or having the wrong color welcome mat. But I figured these were just growing pains of condo ownership. About 3 months after moving in, I started noticing something concerning. There were gaps appearing between the walls and ceiling in several rooms. At first, I thought maybe it was just the building settling, but the gaps kept getting bigger. By month 6, I could fit my finger into some of them. Even worse, I started hearing strange popping and creaking noises coming from the attic at night. I decided to report the issue to the Homeowners Association board. I sent a detailed email with photos explaining my concerns about what looked like foundation problems. I waited for a response, and waited some more. After 2 weeks of silence, I followed up with another email. Still nothing. Meanwhile, the cracks were getting worse. I met one of my neighbors in the hallway one day, and we got to talking about our units. She told me she'd been having the same problems with cracks in her walls and had tried reporting it to the board. I explained that I'd sent multiple emails but wasn't getting any responses. She said she'd had the same experience, having sent 3 emails over the past month with no reply. It felt like the board was pretending we didn't exist. This conversation made me realize the problem was bigger than just my unit. Over the next few weeks, I discovered that residents in at least 8 other buildings were experiencing similar issues. The foundation problems were widespread. and the Homeowners Association was doing absolutely nothing about it. The situation became impossible to ignore when I started researching selling the condo. Every potential buyer's inspector flagged the foundation issues immediately. Nobody wanted to touch the property with a 10-foot pole. I was stuck with a deteriorating asset and an association that refused to acknowledge the problem. Finally, after months of complaints from multiple residents, the Homeowners Association Board called a meeting. They announced they would be issuing a special assessment of $3,500 to each unit owner in the affected buildings to cover foundation repairs. I stood up and questioned why we had to pay thousands of dollars to fix a problem they should have addressed from the beginning, especially after they'd ignored our complaints for months. The board president responded that these were unforeseen structural issues and that special assessments were a normal part of homeowners association maintenance. I pressed further, asking how we could be sure the money would actually be used for fixing our foundations since they hadn't even started repairs yet. The board president simply said the board would handle the repairs appropriately. That response didn't fill me with confidence, but we didn't have much choice. Everyone paid the special assessment and work began on a couple of buildings. The repairs looked professional, and I was cautiously optimistic that my building would be next. Then the work stopped completely. I found out later that the buildings that got repaired first were the ones where board members lived. What a coincidence! Meanwhile, my building and several others continued to deteriorate while the association collected our money and did nothing. I sent multiple emails asking when work would resume on the remaining buildings. The responses were vague at best and completely ignored my direct questions. During this same period, they also raised the monthly homeowners association fees by $50, claiming it was for increased maintenance costs. That's when I got lucky. I met my neighbor who lived 2 doors down, a retired investigative reporter who specialized in exposing corruption in corporations and government offices. When I told her what was happening, her eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm you see in people who've found their calling. She told me the situation smelled like fraud to her, since they were collecting money for repairs they had no intention of completing. She said she'd love to help me fight this. I expressed my doubts about taking on the entire Homeowners Association board, thinking they probably had lawyers and resources we couldn't match. She laughed and told me she'd taken down county commissioners and corporate executives in her career, so a small-time Homeowners Association board would be nothing. She wasn't kidding. Within days, she had organized all the affected residents and started drafting formal complaint letters. But the Homeowners Association board had another surprise for us. They announced a second special assessment, this time for $3,000, claiming the original estimate had been insufficient. The property manager tried to claim during this period that my building didn't actually have foundation problems. I'd had enough of their games. I called 3 different foundation repair companies and had them inspect my unit. The results were shocking. According to the experts, my corner of the building had sunk 3 inches, and the repair estimate was over $10,000 just for my section. I sent copies of these professional assessments to the property manager with a very clear message. I told them I had proof from licensed professionals that my building had severe foundation damage. I made it clear that either they started repairs immediately or I would hire one of these companies myself and bill the Homeowners Association for the full cost when I sold the place. That got their attention. The property manager was suddenly forced to admit that yes, there were foundation problems in my building, but they still didn't start repairs. My neighbor had been busy during this time. She contacted a lawyer who specialized in Homeowners Association abuse cases and also reached out to various city offices. The pressure was building, but the association board kept stalling. Everything changed when the fire department showed up for an inspection. What they found was terrifying. The support beams in the roof were actually breaking from the foundation movement. I was sent photos that showed wooden beams bending and cracking under stress. If those beams failed completely, the roof could collapse. Code enforcement arrived next and issued significant fines to the Homeowners Association. But even facing city fines, the board tried to continue their delaying tactics. That's when the city manager's office got involved. and made it crystal clear that they would sue the homeowners association on our behalf if repairs didn't begin immediately. Faced with the threat of a lawsuit from the city itself, the homeowners association finally hired a foundation company. They held a meeting where the repair company explained the process to all affected residents. That's when we learned just how bad things had gotten. One unit had experienced foundation settling of 6 inches. The structural damage was far worse than anyone had realized. Of course, they hit us with a third special assessment for $2,500 to cover the additional costs. The foundation repairs took months to complete, and then the homeowners association was forced to replace the entire roof system due to the damage from the shifting foundation. The total cost of repairs ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, most of which came from special assessments on the residents. During this whole ordeal, I discovered that the homeowners association had fired their previous 2 property management companies, probably because those companies had tried to address the foundation issues properly. I also learned that the board had been aware of foundation problems for over 10 years, but had chosen to ignore them, hoping they would somehow resolve themselves. The most outrageous moment came near the end of the repair process. Someone discovered that the homeowners association board was planning to sneak a $12,000 special assessment through a sparsely attended board meeting. They hoped to pass it without most residents knowing until it was too late, but word got out. Someone printed flyers and put them on every door in the complex, warning residents about the secret meeting. The next board meeting was packed beyond capacity. I'd seen so many angry homeowners in one room. The first resident to speak demanded to know how the board dared to try sneaking this through without proper notice. Another resident pointed out that we'd already paid over $9,000 in special assessments and wanted to know where that money was going. The board president tried to defend their actions by saying the board had the authority to issue special assessments as needed for major repairs. A third resident angrily responded that they'd had 10 years to address these problems and asked why we should pay $12,000 more because the board was too incompetent to do their jobs. The meeting was chaos. Residents were shouting over each other, demanding answers and accountability. The $12,000 special assessment was voted down overwhelmingly, with practically every resident in attendance voting against it. Once the foundation and roof repairs were finally completed, I put my condo on the market immediately. I'd had enough of homeowners association politics to last a lifetime. The repairs had restored the structural integrity of the building, so I was able to sell at a reasonable price and get out. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.